She walked through those doors in white. Not cream, not ivory, not some blush tone she could later defend as a mistake. White, full length, fitted, with a veil, and the room went silent. Every head turned, every jaw dropped, and my sister, my own blood, stood at the entrance of my wedding venue, smoothed the front of her gown, and smiled like she had every right to be standing there looking exactly like that. I was still in the bridal suite. My maid of honor burst through the door, grabbed my arm, and said 4 words I will never forget for the rest of my life. "Diane, you need to see this." And what happened next, what my husband, Cole, did in front of 200 guests, changed everything. Stay with me, because this story doesn't end the way anyone in that room expected. If you're new here, welcome to Tessa Stories. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications, because we tell the kind of stories that stay with you long after they're over. Now, let's get into it. I need you to understand something before I tell you everything. Rachel and I were never the kind of sisters who braided each other's hair and shared secrets under the covers at night. We were never that. But we were family, and for a long time I believed that meant something real, something that held. I'm Diane. I'm 34 years old. I grew up in a mid-sized town in Ohio with my mother, my father, and my younger sister, Rachel, 2 years behind me in age and about 10 years behind me in emotional maturity, though none of us could see that clearly back then. We had a decent childhood. Not perfect, not broken, just ordinary in the way that most childhoods are when you're living inside them. It's only when you get older and start holding things up to the light that you notice the cracks you missed. Rachel was the pretty one. That's what people said. Not behind her back, but out loud, casually, like it was a fact of nature no one needed to be careful about. Rachel got the looks, Diane got the brains. My aunt used to say it at Thanksgiving like it was a compliment to both of us. It wasn't. It was a comparison dressed up as praise. And the thing about comparisons like that, repeated often enough in front of the right ears, is that they plant something in both directions. They tell one person they are decorative, they tell the other person they are insufficient, and neither of us came out of that unscathed, though we handled it very differently. Rachel leaned into it, the attention, the compliments, the way a room shifted when she walked in. She learned early that her appearance was currency, and she spent it freely. I don't say that with bitterness, I say it as an observation, the kind you can only make clearly once you've had enough distance from the person to see them honestly. I learned early to build something that couldn't be taken away. I focused. I studied hard through high school and harder through college. I built a career in healthcare administration that I was genuinely proud of, not because it was glamorous, but because I had constructed it myself, brick by brick, without anyone handing me anything. I made a life that felt solid and real, and mine. And then I met Cole. Cole didn't chase me. That's the first thing I noticed about him. He didn't perform interest or manufacture reasons to be around me. He didn't send messages designed to impress. He just showed up, consistently, quietly, with this kind of steady, unhurried attention that I hadn't experienced before and didn't quite know what to do with at first. I kept waiting for the version of him that would eventually reveal itself as something lesser. It never came. We met on a mutual friend's dinner party on a Tuesday night in March. It wasn't dramatic. We ended up at the same end of a long table, started talking about something forgettable, and then somehow couldn't stop. By the following Tuesday, we'd had 3 separate conversations that lasted well past midnight. By the end of that month, I knew. I knew. The kind of knowing that doesn't need to be loud or announced. It just settles into your chest and stays there like it always belonged. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, and when he did, on a quiet evening at home, no grand production, no restaurant full of strangers, just the 2 of us and a ring his grandmother had left him, I cried in a way I hadn't cried since my father passed, because it felt like being chosen. Truly, completely chosen, not for what I looked like or what I could offer in the transactional sense, just for me, the actual me, the one that existed in ordinary moments, not the version I put on for the rest of the world. But there was one detail from early in our relationship that I should have paid closer attention to. Rachel had met Cole first. It was brief. A handshake at a family barbecue the summer before Cole and I became official. They'd exchanged maybe 10 minutes of small talk near the cooler before Cole drifted across the yard to where I was standing. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Cole mentioned it once, casually, as context. "I think I met your sister at that barbecue." And that was the end of it. Or so I thought. Rachel never mentioned it. Not once in 2 years did she bring up that she had met Cole before I had introduced them properly. Not when I told her about the man I was seeing, not when I described him, not when I brought him to family dinners and watched her greet him with the practiced warmth of someone meeting a stranger for the first time. She never mentioned it. But 3 months into my relationship with Cole, she called me one evening and said, very casually, very smoothly, "I just want you to know I think he's great. You deserve someone like him." At the time, I heard it as a compliment, a generous one even, coming from Rachel, who rarely gave praise without a minor asterisk attached. It felt like growth, like maybe we were entering a new chapter as sisters. Looking back, I hear it differently now, because what Rachel said and what Rachel meant were almost never the same thing, and it took me 32 years and a white dress at my own wedding to finally understand that fully. Engagement brought out a side of Rachel I had caught glimpses of before, but never let myself name. She inserted herself into every decision with a persistence that I kept reframing as enthusiasm, because enthusiasm was easier to accept than the alternative. The venue, "Are you sure about this space?" I found something a little more impressive. The dress, "It's beautiful, it really is, but have you considered something a little more striking, something people will remember?" The guest list, "Why is so-and-so invited? I thought we were keeping it intimate." "We." She kept saying "we." My mother noticed before I did. She pulled me aside one Sunday afternoon after a wedding planning lunch that Rachel had somehow turned into a 3-hour discussion about centerpieces and said quietly, "Diane, your sister is planning your wedding more than you are." I laughed it off. I told myself Rachel was excited. I told myself she was channeling her own desire for a relationship into mine. I told myself she meant well. I told myself a story because the truth was too uncomfortable to hold at that particular moment in my life. And then, 6 weeks before the wedding, Rachel asked me something that stopped the air in my lungs. She asked me if Cole and I had ever really talked about whether we were right for each other. I stared at her. We were on the phone, and I went completely silent, and I could hear her breathing on the other end, measured and patient, waiting for me to respond. She kept her face, or rather her voice, completely neutral, and said, "I just want to make sure you're not rushing into something, Diane. Cole is a lot. He's charming, obviously, but charm isn't character, and I'm not sure he's as ready as he seems." I should have asked her what she meant by that. I should have pressed. I should have said, "What specifically are you seeing that I'm not?" I should have made her put something concrete on the table so I could examine it in the light. Instead, I said, "We're fine, Diane. Thank you for your concern." And I hung up the phone and sat with a vague, uncomfortable feeling I couldn't fully name for the rest of the evening. 2 weeks later, Cole told me something that cracked the floor beneath my feet. Cole told me, quietly, sitting across from me at our kitchen table, his hands flat on the wood like he was steadying himself before delivering something he'd been carrying alone for too long, that Rachel had called him. Not once, 4 times. He had not told me immediately because he had been trying to determine whether what was happening was something genuine to be concerned about or something else entirely. He needed to be certain before he brought it to me. That was Cole. Thorough, fair, unwilling to hand me a fire alarm before he had confirmed there was actually a fire. The first call, she introduced herself as worried, said she needed to speak to him privately about something concerning she had noticed about me, something she didn't want to upset me with directly. Her tone, Cole said, was careful and practiced, the tone of someone who had rehearsed the call before dialing. Cole listened, politely, said nothing alarming had actually been shared, but something about the construction of the conversation, the way it was architected, stayed with him in a way he couldn't immediately explain. The second call, she told Cole that I had been in a serious relationship before him, one that ended badly, that I had never fully healed from. She said she was concerned I was projecting something unresolved onto Cole, that what I felt for him might not be as clear-eyed as it appeared. She framed it gently, sisterly, the concerned older sibling doing her due diligence to protect her family. None of it was true. Cole knew that. He knew me well enough by then to recognize the shape of a lie dressed up as care. But he kept listening, because sometimes you need to let something reveal itself completely before you respond to it. The third call, Rachel shifted. The pretense of concern thinned. She told Cole that she had always found him impressive, that she admired how he carried himself, that she thought he deserved someone who truly saw him, who appreciated not just the surface of him, but the depth of him. The words were smooth and deliberate, and Cole said the air on that call changed in a way that made him profoundly uncomfortable. He ended it quickly and sat with what had just happened for the better part of an evening. The fourth call, she didn't bother with pretense at all. She told Cole directly, "I think you and I would make more sense than you and Diane. I've thought about it for a long time. I think you have too." Cole hung up, he blocked her number, and then 2 weeks later, he sat across from me at our kitchen table and told me everything. Every call, every word, every shift in tone, all of it. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I sat very still and I listened to every word, and when Cole finished talking, the only thing I felt was a cold, clean, terrible clarity. Like a fog I hadn't known was there had lifted all at once and left the landscape completely bare. Every odd comment, every we, every carefully placed doubt, every phone call that left me feeling slightly less certain of myself afterward, it all lined up in a row and showed me exactly what it was. My sister had been quietly, methodically, and patiently trying to dismantle my relationship from the inside. Not loudly, not dramatically, the way you don't notice water damage until the wall finally caves in. And the wedding was 6 weeks away. I made 2 decisions in that moment. The first, I would not confront Rachel yet. Not directly, not in a way that would give her the chance to reframe, deny, or spin the story before I was ready. The second, I would marry Cole exactly as planned, on our date, in our venue, with our people around us. Nothing about our day would change because of what she had done. What I didn't plan for was what Rachel would decide to do next. I didn't tell my mother, I didn't tell my friends, I told no one except Cole, and we agreed together that silence was the right move for now. We watched, we waited, we kept our demeanor around Rachel completely normal, warm enough to not raise suspicion, measured enough to stay in control of what was coming. She came to the final dress fitting 3 weeks before the wedding. She sat in that chair with her legs crossed and her hands folded and watched me stand in front of that mirror in my gown, and she smiled and said, "You look stunning, Diane, truly." I smiled back. I looked at her reflection in that mirror, this woman I had shared a childhood with, a mother with, a last name with, and I thought, I see you now. I see exactly who you are and exactly what you've been doing and exactly how long you've been doing it. She thought she still had the advantage. She had no idea that Cole and I had spent the previous 2 weeks quietly, carefully, and deliberately preparing for whatever she might do next. We had discussed the possibilities, we had made arrangements, we had put something in place that required no confrontation, no explosion, no scene. Just the right moment and the right room. We thought we had accounted for everything. We had not fully accounted for the white dress. The morning of the wedding, everything was perfect. I want you to hold that for a moment, truly hold it, because the perfection of that morning matters. It wasn't a nervous perfection or a fragile perfection. It was the real kind, the kind that comes from knowing who you are, knowing who you're marrying, and knowing, despite everything, that this day belongs to you. My bridesmaids were dressed and laughing. The venue was breathtaking in the morning light. My bouquet smelled like peonies and something green and fresh that I still can't name exactly, but that I will associate forever with that morning. Cole had sent a handwritten note to the bridal suite that I read 3 times and then folded carefully and tucked into my bouquet because I needed it close to me. It said, "Whatever happens today, you are the only woman in that room. Remember that." I didn't fully understand the weight of whatever happens until Priya burst through the bridal suite door 40 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin. Her face was the color of paper. She didn't say anything at first. She just grabbed my arm firmly, both hands, and pulled me toward the window that overlooked the main entrance of the venue, and she pointed. And there was Rachel. White dress, fitted, floor length, a veil pinned into her hair like punctuation on a sentence I hadn't finished reading yet, standing at the entrance of my wedding venue, greeting guests, smiling. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because it would be easy to say I was furious, and that would be satisfying to hear, but it wouldn't be the whole truth. What I felt first was grief. Raw, sudden, suffocating grief, the kind that descends when something you have been quietly, privately hoping wasn't true turns out to be exactly as bad as you feared. Because some part of me, some small and stubborn part that I had been feeding stories to for years, had spent those 6 weeks after Cole's revelation still hoping I was wrong about Rachel, still hoping there was context I had missed, still hoping that somewhere beneath the calculation and the jealousy was the sister I had grown up next to, the one who used to share the back seat of our parents' car and complain about the same things I complained about. She wasn't there anymore. She had made her choice. Deliberately, on my wedding day, in white. Priya was gripping my arm and repeating my name softly, like she was afraid of how I might respond. Lynn, my other bridesmaid, had gone completely quiet in the corner near the vanity, and I was standing at that window watching my sister work the room in a floor-length white gown, my color, my day, my venue, stopping to greet guests with the ease of someone who believed she belonged exactly where she was standing. Several guests thought she was the bride. I could see it from the window, the confusion landing on faces, the double takes, the polite, uncertain glances between Rachel at the entrance and the bridal suite door at the top of the stairs. People were genuinely unsure, and Rachel was not correcting them. She was threading the ambiguity deliberately, laughing softly at something a guest said, touching her veil lightly as though it were the most natural accessory in the world, accepting the displaced attention with the practiced grace of someone who had been rehearsing this exact moment. Because she had been. I stepped back from the window. I took one long breath. Priya looked at me and whispered, "Diane, what do you want to do?" I was quiet for several seconds. Then I said, "Nothing. I want to do absolutely nothing right now." Because Cole already knew. The moment I stepped back from that window, I had my phone in my hand, and I sent him 3 words. She showed up. His response came in 45 seconds flat. "I'm already handling it. Trust me. Walk down that aisle." I want you to understand how much weight lived inside those 8 words. Everything in me, the angry part, the hurt part, the part that had been holding this for 6 weeks, wanted to walk out of that bridal suite and cross that venue floor and confront Rachel in front of every person she was currently performing for. I wanted to strip away the veil and the smile and the borrowed elegance and say out loud, in front of all of them, exactly what she had done. Every call, every planted doubt, every calculated move across every month of my engagement. I wanted to, but Cole had asked me to trust him, and trusting Cole completely, fully, without reservation was the one thing in that entire day I had never once had to question. So I stood in that bridal suite and I let Priya fix my lipstick, and I let Lynn straighten my veil, and I held Cole's note in my hand until my fingers stopped trembling. And when the music started, I walked. I walked down that aisle like nothing in the world could reach me. I looked straight ahead, straight at Cole, standing at the end of that aisle with his hands clasped in front of him and his eyes already full before I was halfway down. And the expression on his face when he saw me, the way his entire posture exhaled, the way his eyes went simultaneously soft and absolutely certain, that was the only thing that existed in that room as far as I was concerned. Behind me, I could feel Rachel watching. She had positioned herself in a seat near the front of the ceremony space, still in white, still drawing glances, still present in the center of a story that was not hers to be in. I could feel her eyes on the back of my dress as I walked toward my husband. I could feel her recalculating, trying to understand why no scene had erupted, why no one had come to her with demands or tears or confrontation, why the day appeared to be proceeding exactly as planned. She thought she still had the reception. She had no idea what was actually waiting for her there. Let me take you back 3 weeks. The night after Cole sat across our kitchen table and told me about the 4 calls, we stayed up until 2 in the morning talking. Not specifically about Rachel, not about rage or strategy or what to say to her and when. We talked about us, about the kind of people we were separately and wanted to be together, about what kind of marriage we were walking into and what we wanted the foundation of it to look like. Cole said something that night I have thought about dozens of times since. He said, "I don't want our wedding day defined by what Rachel did. I want it defined by what we chose to do about it." That sentence was the blueprint for everything that followed. We weren't going to expose Rachel privately in some quiet confrontation she could later rewrite to anyone who'd listen. We weren't going to call her, engage with her texts, or give her the opportunity to get ahead of the narrative before we had finished writing it. We were going to let her come. We were going to let her perform. We were going to give her exactly the stage she had dressed herself for. And then Cole was going to take the microphone. We told exactly 2 people. Priya, because she was my maid of honor and she needed to know so she could hold herself together when she saw the dress, which we had already suspected Rachel might wear something provocative, but had not anticipated being quite so literal about. And Cole's best man, Derek, because he would be standing next to Cole at the altar and needed to understand what was happening and why Cole might be carrying something heavier than just wedding day nerves. That was it. 2 people in a room of 200. The ceremony was beautiful. I need you to hear that clearly and completely. The ceremony was genuinely, fully, achingly beautiful. Cole cried when he said his vows. Not a dramatic breakdown, just one steady tear down his right cheek that he didn't wipe away because he didn't seem to see any reason to be embarrassed by it. My voice broke twice during mine, and the officiant paused both times and let the room breathe. People were crying in the 3rd row. Cole's mother pressed a handkerchief to her face and didn't lower it for the better part of 5 minutes. It was everything. And Rachel sat in that front section seat in her white dress and watched all of it with a smile that was just slightly wrong, in the way that a painting of a smile is wrong, technically accurate and somehow completely empty. She was calculating, reassessing, trying to determine why her entrance had not detonated the day the way she had planned, why no one had caused a scene, why the ceremony had proceeded with warmth and intention and not a single crack she could slide herself into. She still believed she had the reception. The cocktail hour was where the murmuring began in earnest. Guests who had arrived after Rachel's entrance and missed the initial spectacle began noticing her dress as the crowd loosened and moved through the space. I watched it happen from across the room, the small double takes, the leaned-in whispers between couples, the polite confusion of people trying to quietly understand why the bride's sister was dressed the way she was dressed. Rachel handled it masterfully. I'll give her that. She was skilled. To some guests, she laughed it off lately, something about a fashion moment she delivered with the self-deprecating ease of someone who had pre-planned the explanation. To others, she simply let the confusion breathe, never correcting the misread, never confirming it either, maintaining the ambiguity like a card held close to her chest. She was performing confidence, and she was doing it well. But the reception was starting, and Cole had the microphone. The reception hall was lit and full and glowing with the kind of warmth that makes a room feel like a memory, even while you're still inside it. Cole stood up before the scheduled toasts. He'd arranged with the DJ to cut the music a few minutes early. The room settled naturally, the way rooms do when someone stands with purpose. Glasses lowered, conversations tapered. 200 people turned toward the head table. Cole stood there with the microphone in his hand and looked out at the room with the calm that I had been in love with since that Tuesday night dinner party. Steady, unperformable, completely real. He said, "Before we get into the evening, I want to take a moment to say a few things because I believe the people in this room deserve the full picture of what they're celebrating today." The room was completely still. Rachel was 3 tables from the head table. I did not look directly at her, but I had her in my peripheral vision, and I watched the flicker move across her face, just a small one, just a fraction of a second before she composed herself back into stillness. Cole started with us, with the actual story of us, not the highlight reel version, not the Instagram caption version, but the specific, private, real version. The Tuesday night conversations, the way I showed up for him during a difficult period in his second year that I had never spoken about publicly. The ordinary moments that had convinced him, the ones that had nothing to do with grand gestures and everything to do with who I actually was when no one was watching. Half the room was emotional before he made his pivot. And then he paused. He looked out at the room and he said, "I also want to address something that happened today that some of you may have noticed." The quality of the silence sharpened. Several months ago, I began receiving phone calls from someone I'm going to let introduce herself by her own actions. Those calls were designed to end this marriage before it began, to plant doubt, to redirect my attention away from Diane and towards something else entirely. He did not say Rachel's name. He did not have to. Every person in that room who had seen the white dress at the entrance turned and looked directly at her. Rachel's face shifted into the performance of disbelief, brows raised, head shaking with the patient, measured energy of someone watching a false accusation unfold and choosing composure over reaction. She was good at this. She had always been good at this, the graceful, dignified response to conflict that made the person raising the conflict look like the problem. But Cole wasn't done. He nodded once to Derek. Derek walked quietly to the venue coordinator standing near the side entrance, and the coordinator dimmed the main light slightly and brought up the screen at the far end of the reception hall, the same screen that had been displaying our names in soft script all evening. It now displayed something else. Voicemails, transcribed verbatim, dated, laid out in clean black text on white background. 4 of them. The room read in silence. I had read those transcripts so many times in the 3 weeks since Cole had shown them to me that I had them committed to memory. But watching 200 people encounter them for the first time, watching their faces as they moved through the words, watching the expressions change from curiosity to discomfort to something harder and more certain, was something I was not fully prepared for emotionally. A woman 2 tables from the head table covered her mouth with both hands. Cole's uncle, a large, quiet man who had said almost nothing all evening, pushed his chair slowly back from the table and crossed his arms and looked at the screen with an expression that required no translation. My mother was at a table near the center of the room. I watched her read. I watched her go completely, utterly still in the way that she goes still when something lands too hard for an immediate reaction. She had not known. I had chosen to protect her from it during the engagement because I had not wanted her carrying the weight of it before the wedding. But she knew her daughters. She knew both of them in the way only a mother does, at a level beneath language, beneath explanation, and I watched the moment she understood exactly what she was looking at. The 4th transcript landed the hardest on that room. "I think you and I would make more sense than you and Diane. I've thought about it for a long time. I think you have too." When people finished reading it, the room looked at Rachel. She lasted approximately 90 seconds. The composure came apart in stages, not all at once, but in the specific sequence of someone whose performance has outrun the fuel supplying it. First, the stillness left. Then the expression shifted into something raw. Then the posture changed. She stood up from her chair, and her voice, when she found it, was high and tight, and nothing like the version of herself she had spent years constructing for public consumption. She said Cole had taken things out of context. She said the full story was missing. She said she had been trying to protect me, to protect Diane, and no one in this room understood what it was like, what she had been watching, what she had been trying to prevent. And then my mother stood up. My mother, the woman who had spent 30 years as the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over and found middle ground and believed, genuinely faithfully believed, that family was worth the compromise of almost anything. She stood up at her reception table, looked across the room at Rachel, and said 3 words in a voice I had never once heard her use in my entire life. "Sit down, Rachel." The room went absolutely silent. Rachel looked at my mother, then at me, then at the screen still glowing at the far end of the hall with the transcripts visible for anyone who wanted to look again. And then she picked up her clutch from the table, pushed back her chair, and walked out of that reception hall in her white dress, not with the dignity she had arrived with, but with the specific, unmistakable speed of someone who has simply run out of room. The doors closed behind her, and the room held its breath for one long, suspended moment. And then someone started clapping. I don't know who started it. I didn't see. I just heard it begin. Single, then doubled, then the whole room. 200 people filling that hall with something that wasn't just applause. It was recognition, witness, the sound of a room full of people saying, "We see what happened here, and we see who you are, and we are not confused about any of it." Cole set the microphone down on the table. He crossed the floor toward me. He took my face in his hands and looked at me for a moment before he said anything. And then he said, quietly, just for me, "It's just us now." I cried. I am not the least bit ashamed of that. They were not sad tears, and they were not relieved tears exactly. They were the kind that arrive when something that has been bent and twisted for too long finally straightens out, when the version of events you've been carrying alone finally gets witnessed by everyone in the room at once. The rest of that evening was the wedding I had always imagined it would be. We danced until the venue lights came on. We ate dinner surrounded by people who loved us and who now knew, completely and without ambiguity, the full story of what Cole and I had built together and what had been done to try to pull it apart. The conversations at our table that night were the warmest I can remember. People weren't teetoing or whispering. They were present. Fully present, the way people are when something real has happened and everyone in the room was there to see it. My mother found me near the end of the night, close to midnight when most of the other guests had moved to the dance floor. She took both my hands in hers and stood there quietly for a long moment before she said anything. When she spoke, she didn't apologize for not seeing what Rachel had been doing. She was too honest for hollow apologies, and I loved her for that. She just looked at me and said, "You handled yourself with more grace than I could have managed. I need you to know that." That meant more to me than anything else said to me that entire evening. Rachel texted me once, 11:47 at night, while Cole and I were still at the venue, still in the warmth of the evening. A long message, paragraphs of it, full of justification and reframing, and the specific kind of revisionist accounting that people reach for when they've been caught completely and have nothing left but their own version of events. There was something in there about how I had never understood what it was like to be her, about how everything she did came from a place I was too self-absorbed to see. I read it once. Then I set my phone face down on the table and went back to my husband. I did not respond. I have not responded. I do not intend to. Some messages are not conversations. They are performances given to an audience of one, hoping for a reaction that gives the sender something to work with. The most complete answer you can give to that kind of message is silence, the kind that communicates more precisely than any words you could write back. In the weeks after the wedding, I thought about Rachel more than I expected to. Not with anger. The anger had been clean and brief and had passed through me without leaving residue. What I thought about was something quieter, something that felt, if I'm being fully honest, almost like mourning. Because the sister I grieved wasn't the woman who showed up in white with a veil and an agenda. It was the sister I had spent 32 years hoping still existed somewhere underneath all the comparison and the competition and the quiet resentment. The one who would eventually come around, settle into herself, stop measuring her life against mine. That version of Rachel had been a story I told myself for decades, a story I kept revising because I needed it to have a different ending than the one it always arrived at. Stories, no matter how long you've been telling them, eventually have to end. I blocked Rachel on every platform 6 days after the wedding. Not in a moment of heat, not dramatically, not with an announcement or a message explaining my decision, just quietly, deliberately, with the same calm intention you use when you close a door on a room you know you're not going back into. Cole and I have been married for 7 months now. We are building something that cannot be walked into and destabilized because it isn't built on performance or the approval of people who were never actually rooting for us. It is built on the kind of foundation that gets tested in fire and comes out the other side not weaker, but harder and cleaner and more certain of itself than before. I don't regret a single decision we made. Not the silence, not the screen, not the way it unfolded in front of everyone who is there to see it. The only thing I carry any sadness about is the years I spent giving the benefit of the doubt to someone who had decided, long before I was ready to see it, exactly how she felt about my happiness. I only wish it hadn't taken a white dress at my own wedding to finally make me see clearly what had been right in front of me the whole time. Here is what I know now that I didn't fully understand before all of this happened. Jealousy in the people closest to you rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive loud and obvious with a name tag on. It comes dressed as concern. It comes in small doubts planted at the precise right moment. It comes in the form of praise that somehow always leaves you feeling slightly less than you did before you heard it. It comes from people who know exactly which words to use because they know exactly which wounds are most accessible, because they helped shape some of those wounds themselves. Pay attention to how you feel after certain conversations, not during, after. Because people who genuinely want what is best for you do not regularly leave you feeling uncertain about your choices, your relationship, or your own judgment. That quiet erosion, the kind you can barely name because it happens so gradually, is not love wearing a complicated face. It is something else entirely, and you are allowed to call it what it is. And to anyone who recognizes what I've described, anyone who has a person in their life running that quiet, sustained, patient campaign against their happiness, I want to say this directly. You are allowed to see it. You do not have to keep talking yourself out of what you already know. You are allowed to name it clearly and to act on what you see, not with cruelty and not as a performance for anyone else, but with the quiet, unshakable certainty of someone who has finally decided to stop offering grace where grace has been weaponized. Closing a door on that is not coldness, it is self-respect, and no one, not even blood, gets to take that from you. Diane, signing off with love. If Diane's story moved you, if you saw pieces of your own life somewhere in it, if you've had a Rachel, drop it in the comments. Tell us your story. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us what you would have done differently or whether you would have handled it exactly the same way. This is Tessa Stories, where real women, real pain, and real strength live in the same breath. If you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that button, ring that bell, and stay close, because the next story we're bringing you is going to have you right back in this seat from the very first sentence. We'll see you there.